Hi everyone, this is Heidi and welcome to Nusantara Fairy Tales with Heidi. We are now coming up to episode 42. That's right, episode 42. And today I wanted to tell you a story from Korea, which is very similar to the story I told you in the last episode, episode 41, which was a story called The Hunter and the Seven Swimming Maidens from the Philippines. So, if you recall, that story is the usual story of heavenly maidens coming down to earth, bathing in a body of water, and being spied upon by a man who decides to trap her on earth. Once again, this story is also similar to the one I told you in episode 2, which was the youngest fairy princess of Kayangan. So I thought it was really interesting, quite cool that there is a similar story from Korea. And I always wonder how this kind of trope, this kind of story actually moved throughout the region, throughout the world. In fact, this story, I think it's called the Swan Maiden motif. How this motif travels around the world. So I came across this story, this Korean folktale, actually from a K drama. I think it was called The Fairy and the Woodcutter. And when I watched it, I was like quite amazed that this is very similar to our folktale, and that's why I'm a bit obsessed with it. So I found this story online, so I will just simply read to you the story. It's called The Heavenly Maiden and the Woodcutter. Once upon a time, there lived a young man who lived in the northern Gangwon province near the foot of the Diamond Mountain. He was very poor, and in order to live, he used to go every day to the mountain to cut firewood and sell it to the neighbors. All the other young men of his age were married, but he was so poor that he could not find a bride. He was an honest and conscientious young man who worked very hard and never complained of his hard lot. The villagers used to say, even though the sun may not appear, there is never a day when the sound of his axe is not heard on the mountain. One day, when he was cutting firewood on the mountain, he heard something running towards him over the fallen leaves. This was most unusual, and he stopped work for a moment. He saw a terrified young deer running towards him. When it reached him, it implored him earnestly to help, for it was in great danger. He was touched and immediately hid the deer under the pile of firewood he had cut. Then he went back to work as if nothing had happened. A short while later, a hunter came panting towards him and said to him, "My man, I have been chasing a deer and it ran up here somewhere. Have you seen it?" The burly hunter stood in front of the woodcutter with his bow and arrows in his hands. He was familiar enough with the mountain paths, but among the trees and on the steep slopes, he moved only with difficulty. So the woodcutter looked at him and said, "Yes, I did see a deer. It came running past and went off down the valley over there. I couldn't say where it went after that." So the hunter rushed back down the mountain without delay. After the hunter had left, the young deer came out from under the pile of wood, not daring to breathe, and thanked the woodcutter for his kindness. Weeping with gratitude, the deer said, "You saved my life from deadly peril, and I am most deeply grateful to you. To repay your kindness, I will tell you something that will bring you great success and happiness. Go up the Diamond Mountain tomorrow, and when you come to the lakes that lie between the peaks at the foot of the rainbow, conceal yourself among the bushes by the water's edge. Then you will see 8 heavenly maidens come down from the corner of heaven to bathe in the lakes. While they are bathing, they will hang their silken undergarments on the pine trees by the shore. Do not let them see you, but go secretly and hide one of these garments. Then, when they finish bathing, one of them will not be able to return to heaven. Go to her and welcome her, and she will go with you. You will live happily with her, and children will be born to you. But you must not return her heavenly undergarments until you have 4 children." With these words, the deer vanished, leaving the young man overjoyed at what he had heard. Next morning, the young man got up very early and climbed to the peaks of the Diamond Mountain, where there were 8 beautiful lakes. The mountain is so beautiful that there is an old proverb which says, "Do not speak of scenic beauty until you have seen the Diamond Mountain." It is a spot far from the bustle of everyday life and has been held sacred from earliest times, so that great temples have been built there. Precipitous peaks soar into the blue sky, and trees that have been growing for untold centuries form streams as clear as crystal flow among the rocks till the valleys, and here and there are lakes and waterfalls melodious with songs of birds and the cries of animals. The young man concealed himself among the bushes and waited. Suddenly, in a corner of the sky, the clouds began to seethe, and 8 heavenly maidens came floating down to the lakes at the rainbow's end. They chatted merrily to one another, and all at once took off their clothes and hung them on the pine trees. Then each leapt into the clear water of one of the 8 lakes. As they swam in the water, the woodcutter gazed spellbound at such ethereal beauty. After a while, he came to his senses and recalled the advice that the deer had given him. He crept steadily to the pine trees and took the undergarments of the youngest maiden. Towards sunset, the heavenly maidens prepared to return to heaven. They began to put on their clothes again, but to the astonishment of all, the youngest maiden could not find her undergarments. The others could not wait for her, so they climbed up the rainbow to the sky and left her behind. She stood there utterly bewildered, wondering where to find her clothes, when she suddenly saw the young woodcutter standing before her. It was nearly dark, and the young man apologized profusely for the trouble he had caused her and begged her to forgive him. He was very kind and attentive to her, and he took her to his home. At first, the heavenly maiden found the customs of life on earth most confusing, but she soon settled down happily to the routine of everyday life. The months passed happily by, and then she gave birth to a son. Her young husband was overjoyed and loved her with all his heart, and his mother too rejoiced at their happiness. The heavenly wife seemed utterly contented and lived in harmony with her family. When their second child was born, they were happier than ever. One day, the wife asked her husband to return her heavenly undergarments. "I have given you 2 children. Can't you trust me now?" But her husband refused, for he was afraid that she might carry his children off in each arm. When their 3rd child was born, she implored him earnestly again to return her garments. She served him delicious food and wine, trying to allay his suspicions. "My dearest husband, I have 3 children now. Please just let me have my garments. I can hardly betray you now, can I?" The young man was sympathetic to his wife's feeling, and now showed her the garments which he had kept hidden so long. But alas, when she put them on again, she regained her magic powers and at once went to the sky holding 1 child between her legs and 1 on each arm. Her husband was stricken with grief and reproached himself for not having followed the deer's advice to the end. He went out to the mountain to cut firewood and sat at the same place where he had seen the deer before, hoping that it might reappear. By good fortune, it passed that way, and he told it his sad story. The deer said to him, "Since the day you hid the heavenly maiden's clothes, they do not come down to bathe there any more. So if you wish to find your wife and children, you must go to them yourself. Happily, there is a way. Go to the same lake tomorrow and wait until you see a bottle gourd coming down on a rope from heaven. They drop it to fetch up water from the lake for bathing. You must seize it and empty the water out quickly. Then get on it yourself. They will pull you up at once, for they will not realize that you are on it. That is the only way you will be able to see your family in heaven." The woodcutter took the deer's advice and was able to go up to heaven. When he arrived there, the heavenly maiden said, "This smells like a man," and finding him in the gourd, asked him why he had come. He told them, and they took him before the heavenly king. There he met his wife and children, for she was the daughter of the heavenly king. The king allowed him to stay, and he lived very happily in the heavenly kingdom. He had the most delicious food to eat every day and the most beautiful clothes to wear, and there was nothing at all to worry him. One day, however, he thought regretfully of his mother, whom he had left alone on earth, and told his wife that he would like to go and visit her once again. But his wife begged him not to go, for if he once met Isis' mother, he would not be able to come back to heaven again. But he persisted in his request and promised he would come back without fail. So in the end, she yielded to his entreaties and said, "I will get a dragon horse for you. You will ride on it, and it will take you down to earth in the twinkling of an eye. But whatever you do, do not dismount from it, for if your feet once touch the ground, you can never come back to me." The woodcutter mounted the dragon horse and went down to his mother's house. His mother was overjoyed to see her son again after his long absence. They chatted happily together, and when he bade her farewell, still astride the dragon horse, his mother said, "I've cooked some pumpkin porridge for you. Please have just one bowl." He could not disappoint her, so he took the bowl she offered him. But the bowl was so hot that he dropped it on the horse's back. The horse startled in alarm and reared violently, throwing him to the ground. Neighing loudly, the dragon horse flew up in the sky and disappeared. So the woodcutter never went back to heaven and used to stand every day in tears looking up at the sky. At last he died of grief and was transformed into a cock. So tradition says that the reason why cocks climb to the highest part of the roof and crow with their necks stretched out towards heaven is that the woodcutter's spirit has entered into them and seeks the highest place it can find. The end. So what did you think of that story? Do let me know in the comments below. If you like this video and my other videos, please do like and subscribe to my channel, and I will see you in the next episode.